So, I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the pieces that we presented last night, the one called Ptički Sveta. So, for those who aren't there, I will pass around the score, which is a strange score. So the piece was written in a way that it could be done by not just a professional musician, but also by children who are not trained to be musicians, let alone know anything about contemporary music, and also adults who are not necessarily musicians either, but who could follow the score. And so it is a piece that, as I will describe, is meant to be a piece that not only can be performed by those who ordinarily couldn't participate in a contemporary music piece, but also, you could say, in the process of learning the piece, learn something about what this music is about. So this piece we worked on for how many weeks? More than a month with the children at our home, and basically I had the idea. My wife Olga is Russian. I speak very little Russian, only enough to perform in her pieces. So this whole piece is constructed out of the Russian word ptički, for birds. And particularly I wanted to have birds in this case. This is called Ptički Sveta, birds of light, because of the situation with the war at this time, which has disturbed both of us enormously. I have trouble not to be very, very angry about this war. I won't get into all the things that I feel about Mr. Putin, but let's just say that I think that what is necessary at this point is to find a way to connect with, for me at any rate, with Russian language, with Russian culture that is not infected by this war. I'm from New York originally, and I'm sad to say that there's a good amount of United States that is banning Russian books, Russian music, and all the rest. This is not the answer.
Actually, some area we also had this kind of talking, that banning, Tchaikovsky, for example. I mean, not absurd.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
The problem is not there. So, in any case, the piece has some ideas that are in it that are, you could say, at once inclusion, how to have people participate in a music that many people have trouble with. So, as usual, last night we had small public, but this is everywhere. When I give concert in France, it is the same size public. It is no better, no worse, and the public has gotten smaller over the years. 30 years ago, there was at least 50 persons that would come to any contemporary music concert. Now it is more like 10 to 20. So there is a real problem with inclusion and communication and all the rest. There is a kind of rejection. So this score is a score that I call strange attractor score. Why? Because in the last 30 years, I got very interested in chaos. And the idea that underneath seeming disorder, there is a kind of underlying order, but an order that you can't see except graphically. So this score is in a way a representation of an underlying order that when one, yes?
For me, I was seeing that as a finite state automaton from the perspective of algorithmic composition. So, but the strange attractor, I don't know so much about it, but strange attractors I more see that as some complicated chaos equations.
It can be, but I worked a long time with Xenakis, but personally I am not mathematician nor engineer or anything of the sort, but I find that there are concepts that come from mathematics or physics which can be inspiring for artists without pretending to be such a thing oneself.
But for me this is a clear conception of a finite state automaton. So you have the states every node, and then you have the order go only by the arrows.
Well,
then which way you choose, this is some sort of random or extraordinary rule things.
This is a question also of the work, because the first time that we read through the piece together, it was quite random what each person was doing, because the piece has just a few simple rules. So I'll read you the instructions. It says, for two or more vocalizing birds, in quotes, optional amplified with electronics, always vocalize with Russian pronunciation of Cyrillic letters, phonemes, can speak, sing, or speak-sing, the pitches of Russian language, can start anywhere in the attractor's score, following multiple paths in the network which are indicated, can stop, restart, choose another starting point, or other network paths. So there's just a few simple signs. One is an arrow going in one direction, which says start with a letter or phoneme, follow the arrow direction, move forward to the right, up or down to the next letter or phoneme. The opposite one says start with letter or phoneme and follow the arrow direction, move backwards to the left, up or down to next letter or phoneme. And then there is this double arrow one, which is the possibility to create loops. Start with letter or phoneme, then create a loop by moving to the right and then to the left, up and down for an indeterminate number of times before moving to the next letter or phoneme. Durations of each event are indeterminate but proportional to the lengths of lines between letters and phonemes. The longer the line, the longer the sound. The shorter the line, the shorter the duration of the sound. Dynamics are variable in intensity. Lengths of pauses between events is indeterminate, either short or long, or not at all, depending on context of music. Timbres for the bird voices can be chosen to augment or supplement the Russian phonetic sounds. Length of piece, minimally 5 minutes, maximally 15. So last night we did 15. So the business about the birds, for example, we were thinking about the seagulls around here that you hear all the time. And at one point we were practicing all to be these kind of birds with this kind of timbre. But in fact, this score, yes?
This is this for you personally or for the others also?
Yes, for all.
For
all persons have the same score.
I admire especially these boys that how they are. It's possible they contact with you both so well, and it's like you said, you take you made this prov. Repetition
Recursion.
for over 1 month.
Yeah.
It's then I understand a bit more. But with this age, boys,
It requires work because, in fact, it doesn't happen right away. Yeah.
Now, my question is, if I see that, of course,
Yeah.
if everybody can move, start or move as their own choice,
Yes.
is there still some other layer of structure? Because
Yes.
Because I was listening, it starts with noise sounds and then came more pitch sounds. There was a development what is not understand, what is not, I think, not described in
That's
in
right.
part.
This is skeleton score.
So-
it is not score. It is. This is why
It
I
is a
call.
score.
This is why I call it is score. It is a sort of like underlying structure score. It is not the piece.
Now, from myself, I see score as everything what describes what the performer has to do.
Yes, I write sometimes scores like that too. But in this case, I wanted to make a score that would be possible for children too. So if I make a score like I usually make, which usually even performers who are very experienced complain to me about because it's very detailed, I work with lots of parameters, etc., etc. Here, the idea is to make as simple a score as possible, but at the same time, which gives the possibility to learn something about what is music. And
Yeah, but
Yeah.
my question is, if I understood also there was this some formal structure in the sounds. Is
Yes.
this formal structure is this just a choice for this performance, or if, for instance, if I take the score and make something completely different in the formal structure, is it then the same piece or it's a different piece? Then?
it is the same piece because of the strange attractor. The idea of strange attractor, I'd be very simple about what I take from the theory of strange attractors of chaos. It says that there can be a situation where events are determined but not predictable. So this structure means that there are everything that's in this structure determines what we hear. But at the same time, we don't know what comes next. So this came from, in the early 1970s, the study of the weather by a guy named Lorentz. And he made this famous butterfly attractor. It was the first strange attractor. And he was surprised to find that underlying the weather, which seems random, because we don't know from one day to the next what it does, that there is this form. So this is what inspired me. The idea, we can make something that, because you know that because I worked for a good number of years with Xenakis, the first thing Xenakis said to me is, don't imitate me. Be your own composer. I don't want to influence you. So I took this very seriously. So I put myself in opposition to his idea about stochastic music. Because in and he complained to me, he said, oh, you use chaos, this is deterministic chaos. I use stochastic music, this is non-deterministic chaos, this is superior. So I said, for you, it is superior. For me.
But this is not deterministic.
Actually,
This is deterministic. This is deterministic chaos.
Why?
Because you have to obey the rules of the structure. You can't just do anything
My
you want.
question is,
So, for example, if you are here, you can't go backwards. It's like a one-way street. If you have this word, you can't go this way. You can't go this way. You can go this way. You can go
you're on
this
this
way.
place. But what I do if I on this place?
If you're on this place, you can go here, you can go here, or you can go here.
But
You
then
have
it's
three
non-deterministic
It is
because
deterministic.
Why?
It's deterministic with choice. All determinism doesn't just say A or B. There is determinism with choice. So here we
Yeah,
have
what determines me to choose this one, two, or
my
three?
ears. When I listen to the other person, I choose the best thing musically. It is not the computer that determines. I listen and I make a choice.
For me, it's non-deterministic algorithm.
I have one
Sorry.
And then in that case, all interpretation of music is non-deterministic.
Exactly.
Okay, so we are talking about two ideas about determinism. There's one determinism that says you must absolutely, if A, absolutely B. There's another one that says if A, maybe B, maybe C, maybe D, but certainly not D, E, and F. That's also a determinism, but it's a much more limited determinism than the exact determinism.
Maybe it's not 100% undetermined, but of course, as I remember the definition of non-deterministic, in a deterministic algorithm, you you take the same input and you get every time the same output.
No, in chaos it's
That
not
is,
the case.
that is maybe this is the definition in this formal grammar.
But the thing is that in chaos, what's specific to chaos theory is the idea that if you have the attractor shape, you know that the weather, for example, if we're talking about the weather, it has to be on the shape somewhere, but you can't say where. Somewhere on the shape, but we can't say exactly where. So this is a new kind of determinism. It's not at all the determinism of Isaac Newton. It's a contemporary determinism that is mixture of order and disorder.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of chaos. It is mixture of order and disorder. So this score is very disorderly and at the same time orderly, because it says if you're in a certain place, you have a limited number of choices as to what you can do next. And make that choice based on listening. So over the course of the month that we worked together, I tried many strategies with the children, with Olga, with myself, to see what is working. So I give you an example of one of them that we worked with. This one has some similarity actually to what we did last night, but not exactly. So this is if you will, a kind of form for a 15-minute version of the piece. So for the first 2 minutes, phoneme sounds only, quiet, sparse. The birds are starting to wake up. They're asleep and they start to wake up. Second part, 4 minutes. Phoneme plus air hole sounds. I have the instrument to show what I mean. So the air hole sounds are this sounds using this. So these are introduced into the second part. Things get a little bit denser. The birds start to wake up. They become a bit more active. We start to have the first solos. So you see, I tried to describe the form in a non-technical way, in a way just to give an idea that could maybe reach the imagination of the children. Mm-hmm. Here, we're not talking about just abstract sounds. We're talking about birds. Imagine the birds, okay? This is how they're making their music together. So in this second section, we go from pianissimo, let's say, to globally mezzo forte. Third section, 6 minutes. Mixture of phoneme and air hole sounds, and now we have double sounds. Voice plus these kind of sounds. So a third sonic element is now added. Sounds become more and more dense. Birds start to interact back and forth more and more with each other. Fourth part, a kind of coda, 3 minutes. Getting quiet, sleepy again, going towards pianissimo, opposite of the beginning, inverse of the beginning, only phoneme sounds, less and less dense. So this is an example of one of the forms we tried. So each day we are inventing and trying out different forms to get them, yes.
Yeah, another question is how you deal with this score? Because the score is only describing phonemes, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is something that I was going to talk about. Actually, what I'm doing now is just introducing the piece. I have a written thing that goes into more detail formally about what I did.
So if you have this recorder sounds,
Yes.
did it breaks out then from this algorithm?
The recorder sounds were chosen in the course of the month-long work. We didn't use them at first. So in other words, as we're working day after day, we're trying different things.
My question is, if I have now to play with the recorder sounds,
yes.
do I have to follow this algorithm at the same time?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that means, do I have to find a sound what means each? Then I have to find another sound what means teach.
Yes, absolutely.
It was yesterday. It was.
So I combined.
I don't know because I was
doing the sound.
Doing the sound and didn't saw.
Yes. These are hybrid sounds between phonemic or letters. So the other idea here was to derive all the piece from language. Okay, so there isn't a single thing in the score that's not either a letter or a phoneme or a part of a word. It's completely linguistic. So this is also idea that I've been working with for the last few years. I made, for example, a piece where there was a play by American playwright Sam Shepard. And it is this play is called The War in Heaven. And so what I did for this piece was I first recorded myself reciting the piece as though I was just acting the piece. Then what I did was I took everything that was recorded and transcribed it into musical notation. So exact pitches, quarter tones, glissandi, everything. So that the speech itself gave rise to the music. I have another project where we did this with James Joyce reading Finnegan's Wake. So there's only one little passage from Finnegan's Wake from An Olivia Pluribel episode where he reads a portion of it. So we transcribed Joyce's way of performing An Olivia Pluribel and made it into music. So that now baritone voice will sing what James Joyce said. So this connection between speech and singing, between language and music, is something that interests me very much. The other reason it interests me is because besides being a musician, I am psychoanalyst in the Lacanian school. And I'm very interested in this importance of language on the body. And so Lacan has an idea of kind of a primordial language of baby, which he calls la langue. And la langue is the language that the baby uses before he learns a language. So every baby, before he learns Estonian, English, Russian, whatever, has his own little language. He has his own sounds, he has his own... So in a certain way, I believe that music comes before formal language. Mm-hmm. Because I think that this babbling, this sound that the baby is making in the first year or two of life is a kind of music. And then, in order to be part of the society, the baby is forced to more or less give up this first, you could say, language of enjoyment. Because the baby enjoys making these sounds. And that's the whole point. The point is, Lacan talked about how we don't speak necessarily to communicate, we speak to enjoy our body. That language is something for enjoying. And that then, secondarily, when we become civilized, in quotes, we have to share language with others, agree to grammar, agree to certain ways of speaking, but poets, musicians, we keep some of this enjoyment, and this is a piece about enjoying language. So,
why do you think that baby only enjoys what he or she expresses? I guess he or she also expresses his or her feelings.
yes. Yes.
But
Yes.
it mustn't be enjoying.
I didn't get into the whole Lacanian theory of what enjoyment means. He has this term jouissance, which is very, very. It is closer to what Freud wrote about in a little book called Beyond the Pleasure Principle. So enjoyment doesn't necessarily mean you have fun or that you're happy. So there is even an idea in psychoanalysis that some things can be enjoyed which cause suffering. So it's much more complicated than I speak because I have fun speaking. Maybe sometimes you have fun speaking, but if nobody listens to you and you're sitting there starving, it's not so much fun for the baby, I mean, of course. So the children who can sometimes become autistic, in other words, refuse the contact with the other, can be someone where you could say they call, but there's no answer. In other words, no one responds. Okay? And this can be for a lot of reasons, not because mother is nasty or mean or something, but there is a study where if mother is depressed, if she's sad and she can't respond to the baby, then baby makes these sounds, because the sound isn't just for him, it's also to call the mother. In other words, when he makes his sound, he also wants a response from the mother. In other words, to give him milk, to take care of him, whatever. All of that. But the point is that what remains of this first enjoyment of language comes through in the work of art, in the way we make use of language. So, as I say, can be poetry, can be all forms of literature, but also in the music. How language and the music come together. So this piece is, you could say, pure language and pure music at the same time. And every note that the children or myself or Olga made has a pitch, of course. We didn't write them down, but they all have pitches. So we're listening to each other and we're reacting.
And what is this?
Shh. That has a pitch too.
Which pitch that has?
What is it? She has perfect pitch.
It is closer to loud. Yes.
Once more.
Because you can make, for example, if I start. So I start with a pitch which is practically noisy, and then I can add more voice to the same pitch. And even sometimes when I played in my piece glissando flute, that I know what kind of noises I do with, and I put the same fingering for the glissando flute that it more resonates, it corresponds, because there is also resonance if you have the same pitch. So the thing is that even when something sounds as a noise, if it is not electronics, so you can find, especially in the body, you can find the source.
Yeah, of course you can
understand it.
Because it is not the same. You hear that there is difference.
It is.
You cannot avoid the
there is.
resonances in your body, of course.
Well, the thing is that even noises have fundamentals. It's just that the harmonic content is so, you could say, covering it, you practically don't hear it. This only gives this idea of relative pitch for these noises. In any case, since I've given you a kind of general idea of the orientation, I try to go through briefly with you what I wrote about this, because this piece also connects with the work that I did with a group that I founded in France called CLSI, So last night it was DLSI, Duo for the Liberation of Sound and Image, but there's another group called Circle for the Liberation of Sound and Image, which makes up a lot of people. So in this group, we did our own version with computers of Procession and Kurzwellen of Stockhausen. And there in Procession, you are supposed to react to older pieces of Stockhausen. He lists different pieces that different instruments, whether in his duo it is, not his duo, his quartet, whether it is piano, whether it is tam-tam, whether it is viola, whether it is a synthesizer. And so in our computer version, instead of like the musicians trying to pretend that they are reacting to sounds that they may or may not be able to play. For example, in Procession, you can play sounds from the Klavierstück of Stockhausen and transform those. But the tam-tam, for example, is supposed to transform sounds from momenta. So I could never understand how with the tam-tam you are supposed to transform sounds from momentum. So what I decided to do was I gave each of the members of our group samples from the pieces that he mentions, and therefore they transform those sounds using, in our group, we had viola, we had piano, we had percussion, and we had synthesizers. So close to Stockhausen's original group. And each one of those was accompanied by someone with a computer who did further timbre transformations, a bit the way Stockhausen himself did, using filters and modulators on the members of his group back in the 1960s. So for those of you who don't know these process pieces of Stockhausen, sounds are presented. In the case of Kurzwellen, it is shortwave radio sounds. They are presented, and then the musicians are supposed to transform them with signs like plus, minus, or equal. So if they have equal, it's sort of imitating the sound that's been presented. If it's plus, they have 4 parameters that they should work with: pitch, duration, rhythmic segmentation, and dynamics. So if you have in the score 4 pluses, it means you take each one of those parameters, you make the pitch a bit higher, the duration a bit longer, more rhythmic segments, and you make it louder. So that's the idea of these process pieces. Afterwards, he added all kinds of other signs, but basically it's quite abstract music. This is a piece where he depends on the sequence of these signs to create a form. So in Petički Sveta, I don't have this plus minus stuff. That's exactly what we determine when we play together. So in other words, here, instead of the plus minuses, in other words, take this sound, make it higher, make it lower, take this sound, make it longer, make it shorter. We did all of that, but we didn't do it according to a written score. We did it by listening to one another. So the Stockhausen approach is to write a score which lists all the transformations that you are supposed to do in a certain order, but it doesn't say which sound you apply. And it's the sound that's random in the Stockhausen case, because the members of the group never know what sound is coming next. It's the whole point. You don't know what sound is going to come from the radio. You don't know which sample, because when we did the samples, we had the samples appear randomly. So nobody knew ahead of time which piece they're going to have to transform, which little sample from which piece. So when we did this Stockhausen, we had to have, in order to do this and to make any kind of form out of it at all, because otherwise you have either 4 persons all playing at once and it becomes a kind of chaos. So we had a conductor, And the conductor was cueing in solos, duos, trios, and quartets, just as I was doing last night in the third section of Politički svet. So the conductor, it seems to me, or someone that's overseeing the performance, is very important to shape the performance. So, to go back to the idea of what are the children learning about music making? What they're learning is about form. How does form appear? Okay? So this whole piece, this chaos piece, is about emergent form. That's the whole idea of chaos theory. The idea of chaos theory is out of this mixture of order and disorder, a form appears. And it turns out a lot of nature is like that. This idea of emergent form is very, very important. A form you couldn't predict ahead of time, but as a result of a process. The process itself makes the form emerge. So, last night what you heard were emergent forms. I didn't have not one of those forms predetermined. I determined them as I'm listening, and each person has to listen to the other, react to the other, for the emergent forms to appear. So, in Politički svet, I thought of my work in CLSI, the Stockhausen pieces, and how to apply it to a new kind of chaotic music, strange attractor score with emergent form. The idea was to have a distinct graphical form in the score that would guarantee that seemingly random musical events are not aleatory, but chaotical. That is, where musical events would be determined by the strange attractor score, but not predictable as to their musical outcome, leading to not fixed but emergent forms. In Politički svet, there was also the idea of scores that could be played by children or non-musicians, adults, and that in a type of music making where what's really important is intensive listening. So over the month that we rehearsed, that's what we worked on the most, listening. It was the most important thing, that the children learned to listen to themselves and to the others. Yeah?
Sorry, your speech was so much of different information. I couldn't really follow because I am not a specialist of this type of music thinking. And how to write emergent? What word it is? Sorry for my English.
Emergent.
Is it an E or I?
Yes, E-M-E-R-G-E-N-T.
Emergent.
Emergent.
That means
Like something that emerges.
What means it? Growing up or?
What it means is it shows itself over time.
Okay, and then the other thing. jah. mida?
avalduma või?
Avaldub või no ma sõna, saksa sõnaraamat nagu tõuseb või midagi sellist.
Ma mõtlesingi.
Pigem avardub. Mitte avaldub, vaid avardub.
Avardub, jah. No siis
avardub on nagu selline omadussõna, aga...
See oli omadussõna, jah.
So in yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And the other thing,
yeah.
It was very dense senses, and I'm very bad.
I can read it again if you.
Yeah, and then they had these two words. One was aleatoric and the other was chaotic.
Yes.
And it seems that you make a difference between them.
Yes, I do. And so aleatoric is what Xenakis called non-deterministic chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Chaotic is deterministic chaos in the sense that in the aleatoric music, let's say for example I throw a coin, it's heads or tails. This is a purely aleatoric process because there's nothing determining whether it's head or tails except chance itself.
Mm-hmm.
So every toss of the coin is independent of every other one. So with the weather, the events that are happening today are not independent of what happened a few hours ago or a few days ago. So the point is, even if we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the weather today, we know that in some way it's connected to what happened before.
Yeah.
because all of these weather patterns converge and have an overall effect to create an emergent weather.
ma saan aru, et süsteemide juures nimetatakse seda mäluga ja mäluta süsteemideks. See, millest ta praegu räägib, aga ma saan ka aru, et alatoorika, see on nagu, tehakse vist vahet juhusel ja kaosel. It is also, I understand, right? It is also difference about, mis on change, kuidas on juhus?
Okay, if I now I understand it like this,
okay, no, but
if you take chaotic as non-deterministic,
chance.
as non-deterministic
No,
chaos,
chaotic is deterministic. It's just non-predictable.
yeah.
This idea of determined but not predictable was
I
developed
know.
50 years
It's
ago.
like the logistic equation.
Exactly.
And
It's
the
the
logistic equation, you can not predetermine what comes after 100 rounds up. But if you every time start with the same input entry, you will every time after the hundreds turn you will end exactly with the same chaotic.
Well,
sequence.
the logistic equation has this chaoticity factor. If the chaoticity factor is more, I think, than 3, if I remember correctly, you go into chaos. If it's less than 3, you get alternations between order and disorder.
3.1, I don't remember.
Yeah, it's
You can
something
read
like
the
that. But the point is that there are equations for chaos, and the logistic. This is the most famous one, and it's also the one that composers try to use to make chaotic music. So I tell you off the bat, I reject this calculation of chaos because I think that for music it doesn't make sense. What I prefer is that if composer wants to take concepts from chaos, that they really think hard how to apply those concepts to their music. In other words, how chaos makes sense for your music, my music, whoever's music, that we have to really think in terms of not just the equation, but the musical application. So is why I didn't say anything to the children about all of this stuff I'm talking to you, because it would be nonsense to them. It wouldn't make any sense, and it wouldn't teach them anything at all about music. So here, what's much more important is how do we make music together? You know? And that's the only thing that counts. All of the rest, we say in French, petite cuisine du compositeur, the little kitchen of the composer. So if I like chaos, is my petite cuisine. It's my place to imagine things.
Do you think that the audience can make an audience, or maybe also even educated audience, can feel the difference between an aleatoric piece or between a chaotic piece?
But I don't know. I mean, we could take a poll about the people who listened to the piece last night and whether they thought it was aleatoric or
Hans,
not.
I have a very good term. It's determined ambiguity.
Yeah.
What we are actually, what we are looking, it's actually, it was already 60s, the Gagel was actually who used this term. Determined ambiguity. I mean, especially talking this score, actually.
Because, for instance, the problem is I have used Maximus P a lot, and of course, it's very easy. Of course, I'm lazy. I'm not generating real random. I just use the random algorithms what the computer uses, and they are never non-deterministic because computer cannot.
You're right.
Computer is not able to.
You're
generate.
right, and one of the things that I said, I wasn't nice to Xenakis, was I said to him, your stochastic things are not aleatoric, because everything you're calculating is determined by your equation. Anything that I can make an exact calculation for can't be aleatoric, because aleatoric means I don't know. So the minute that I make calculations with the computer, with pseudo-random generators or whatever,
Yeah.
I have a result which immediately when I use it, it becomes determined.
Yeah.
So what I'm actually trying to do is make a music where, without it being completely random, there is something that you could say is holding the structure together, but something that leaves a lot of room for, you could say, not knowing what's going to happen.
What about that if I, for instance, replace the Maximus P random generator
Yes.
by maybe I take a transistor what makes analog noise and sample it, what in theory should be real random, what is not generated from any chaotic deterministic chaotic algorithm, makes this the difference.
I would say that it will probably sound more aleatoric than the number generator, because today, whenever I hear people using this kind of Maximus P algorithm, I know right away what they've used, because it sounds a certain way. It's predictable in terms of its result. So they can't fool me. I know how they made it, and I hear it. So, but the same is true for many algorithms for me. I've heard them so many times now that when I hear them, I say, oh, well, that's this or that's that or the other thing. So what I'm interested in is to give people the experience, oh, I didn't hear that before. If even one person in the public says to me, oh, I never heard that before, I'm satisfied. Because it's so rare that anybody says, with everything that's ever been done in contemporary music, because everything's been tried, right?
Yeah.
Since 50s, in the last 70 years, everything's been tried. So, oh yeah, that sounds like Kagel. Oh, that sounds like Stockhausen. Oh, that sounds like Xenakis. I want to strangle the people that tell me things like that. But
of course, the more you have experience in listening, the more you have your analogies, and also
yes, and it's normal that we don't want to be in a situation where we don't know. And we say, I have no idea.
Yeah.
We always say, oh, it sort of reminds me of this, or it sort of reminds me
yeah, you cannot
of
avoid
that.
it.
You can't avoid it, because people
Yeah.
try to make
And
sense.
that is what me disturbs most in the German composition education. They have still this ideology or idea of this avant-gardism, that you have to search for something what has never been proven, and I found very quickly out that's impossible. So, for me.
Well, it's impossible if you approach it like that, because if you approach it like that, chances are you are going to hit on one of the things that's already been done. But you wanted to say something.
Yes, I only hear your discussion, and I think it is mostly terminological, because when we talk about this concept of chaos,
Yeah.
I understand in absolute meaning chaos is something that, ma võin eesti keeles äkki oskate tõlkida, et ühesõnaga kaosele juhuse, mina olen lugenud süsteemiteooriast nii, tehakse vahet, juhus on see, et sündmuse toimumine üldiselt on tõenäoline, aga üksikuna ebatõenäoline. Aga kaose puhul on mõlemal juhul nad ebatõenäolised. Et ühesõnaga, mis tähendabki nüüd seda, et absoluutse kaose puhul tegelikult me ei saa üldse aru, kas toimus kontsert või toimunud. Ühesõnaga, siin ei ole, ta on nagu võimatu objekt, selles mõttes metafüüsiliselt võimatu olukord üldse. Ja, aga nüüd, kui te räägite, ma saan aru, et Gérard räägib nagu kaosest veel mingi, ütleme, kaootilisus on ilmselt nüüd see mõiste, millest ta räägib, et siin võib olla nüüd rohkem või vähem determineeritud.
Ta räägis deterministlikust
Jaa,
kaost.
just nimelt.
See logistiline
no just, et nüüd on nagu see, et see on kaose nagu kitsam tähendus. Ma tahan öelda seda, et tuleb selgeks teha, kas me räägime sellest kõige totaalsemas mõttes või ütleme, me räägime mingitest kitsatest alltähendus. Ühesõnaga on olemas mõiste kaootilisus, see on igas juhuslikus protsessis sees.
Shortly, what was there, because like a chaos as a total thing, or chaos that there have lots of different small I mean
it's something I've worked on for 30 years, and I have a whole book about it. But in briefly, For me, there is chaos on micro, meso, and macro level.
Yes.
So you have different levels of
Yes,
chaos.
yes, of course.
And it's not one thing, it's many things. But I only mention it in passing to explain this kind of score. So you could say that rather than giving a lesson to children about what is chaos, which would be completely useless and do nothing but create confusion, the idea is to create a situation by the structure of the score that puts you in that situation, and then you have to make music within that situation. And then what do you figure out? What you figure out is that finally there are many things, even if the score is chaotical, that are still the same problems. So for example, I always say to students that I have who study computer music with me, don't think that the computer is going to solve even one problem of composition for you. It won't solve not even one. In fact, what it will do is it will make your problems worse. You'll know less what you're doing, and you'll think you know more.
I say that the computer and all this algorithm, this is a tool. But you are the composer and you are leading. And,
Exactly. I agree totally.
Yeah.
I agree totally. The point is that you know, many times people said to Xenakis, "Oh, you're the one that invented algorithmic music." He said, "No, I didn't invent algorithmic music. For me, computer was always tool." And he said, "The only reason I use computer is to not compose somebody else's music." And then he said, after I learned how I can create with score what the computer helped me to discover, I don't need the computer anymore. So in the last orchestra pieces, ensemble pieces, he doesn't use the calculation anymore because he knows what it's going to give. And so he can use what he learned from making those experiments with the tools.
So if he hasn't invented algorithmic compositions, and maybe it was Litter and Hiller.
I think it was legit.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because I think he used this term. It seems that I haven't
yes.
At the first is
yes.
With this Iliad suite, and
it's
a beautiful piece. And
yes, but he's the inventor of algorithmic music. It's not Xenakis.
Yeah.
These ST pieces are not algorithmic pieces. Because what he does, and he continued to do this to the end of his life, he uses the computer to generate material. Then, what he doesn't like, he throws in the garbage. What he does like, he puts in his piece. And this is not algorithmic.
I like also to work like this,
Yeah. So the point is that it and a lot of people criticized him for not doing algorithmic approach. They say, "Oh, you're not rigorous. You're not rigorous because you throw away some of what the computer generates." He said, "But I'm the composer. It's not the computer."
Too human.
Maybe I personally, but I'm personally violating maybe this term of algorithmic or algorithmic composition, and so even if I choose by myself, then it's particularly algorithmic. Or I have and also I for myself I widen the term of algorithmic music so wide that also Schoenberg's serial technique is some sort of algorithm, or even maybe Guillaume de Machaut isorhythmic motet. It all what it has.
So we need to make a distinction between algorithmic generation and algorithmic composition, because when you create materials, this is generation.
Yeah.
But how you use them is the composition.
Exactly.
So yes, Guillaume de Machaut or Dufay, they make these isorhythmic motets because they generate a certain type of material. But how each one of them then uses it to make the piece is the difference between Machaut and Dufay, right? Mm-hmm. So the composer has a responsibility. So I wrote a little book now for this 100th birthday of Xenakis, which is called Yanis Xenakis and the Ethic of Absolute Originality. And it talks about lots of these things that we're talking about now. and how much it was important for Xenakis, this idea of ethic, of taking responsibility. So composer has to take responsibility for the result. He can never say, "Oh, the computer did that." It's not my fault. It's the computer that made the piece.
Yeah, of course. Then comes to this big question: if we have nowadays this artificial intelligence, and there comes so much of questions. For instance, can we generate a computer system what can act like a composer? I think we can't. And of course, all this AI, what is nothing more like a more generalized or more widened learning algorithm-based algorithmic composition, like the systems they are imitating Mozart or imitating other stars. For me, that is not composing.
No.
That is such an imitation generator. They are really fantastic, and they can fool experts.
Yes. But it is not very different than the people who can make a fake Rembrandt, or imitate any master painter. Once you figure out, you could say, the mannerism of the artist, you can try to imitate it. But what you will find lacking is the imagination. In other words, to me, the main thing that we're talking about in composition is something like imagination. So all of the people who say to me that it's impossible today to make anything new, I say, it depends on your imagination. If you can imagine something new, you can make something new. But you have to have an imagination. If you have none, then you will make nothing new. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the composer to use all their capacities of imagination. And that's very, very difficult to define. And it's the one thing, of course, that you can't teach anyone. People have it or they don't have it. But I believe that where teachers can help is to give the permission, to say to the student, it's okay to have your own style. You're not obliged to imitate the models of the past. You're not obliged to make music like Schoenberg, or to make music like Xenakis or whoever. You're not obliged. You can make your own music, and to encourage that in the students. Of course, having a good imagination doesn't necessarily mean you're going to write great music either, because it has to be what Xenakis called cold fire. What he meant by cold fire was there's a fire, which is the inspiration, and then the coldness is the analysis, the rationality, the logic of the composition, which has to be there too, but not too much. Because if it's there too much, then it puts out the fire. So you have to have this balance between this great imagination and at the same time a sufficient amount of technique. But also, you were talking about philosophy in your thesis, Anders. I believe philosophy is extremely important in composition, and it is because there has to be a process where you could say the composer has a certain amount of analysis of what they do. They mustn't intellectualize too much, but a certain understanding of what they do. Enough, but not too much. So all of that stuff is hard to balance. So where does chaos fit in all of this? So in the pieces of Xenakis, you have this dialectic between order and disorder. So I've put in the third one, this chaos. So order, disorder, chaos. So chaos, in my way of composing, is a mixture of order and disorder. So you could say disorder in the sense of unpredictability on the micro level, but you could say an underlying structure which is there. So in this sense, 12-tone music is chaotical.
System, yeah, of course.
Yes. So
Chaotical, it is as omadus, kuidas on adjective, yeah. Because for me, chaos is something finalized, total. But chaotical as adjective, I can use in whatever. Okay, these books are chaotically put it here. In some way,
it's a good distinction to make, because we're not talking about chaos as a fixed result. We're talking about it as a quality of the music, but not
because in total way we actually don't know what chaos is.
No,
because it is also incorporated in conception of chaos. Nobody doesn't know about what chaos is.
Nobody knows what chaos is, but on the other hand, it seems to be omnipresent in nature.
Yes.
It's everywhere in nature. Yeah. Probably we wouldn't have the enormous diversity that we have. So then this brings back, when we talk about nature, the famous fractals, right? Mm-hmm. So fractalized composition means where you find the same structures at many levels. Okay? So, in other words, in a fractalized composition, for example, let's say that this is sort of like the macro form, and then you find within little moments here and there, bits and pieces of it. So it's a bit like a big mountain that has layers and layers and layers of rock, and each one of them resembles the big layer. So, but not exactly, because fractals are much more complex. They're not simple transformations of the large structure. They have this nonlinear aspect to it, and this is what makes the chaos quite difficult to understand. It's this nonlinear system idea where a small thing makes a big effect. So, there's the famous story of that the flapping of the butterfly wing here creates some great event, many thousands of kilometers away. So a small injection into the system of a very small, unpredictable thing can make a big difference in terms of the result. So, for example, when I come back to how we were working together with this, which is that we're working on this piece, and I'm listening to it, and I'm saying to myself, well, it's all very interesting, but there's something missing. What is there that's missing in the piece? And I had lots of different ideas, so maybe change the form, maybe change the colors. So we worked on the different sounds of different birds. We worked on the idea, should it be conducted, should it not be conducted? All kinds of different aspects to, you could say, improve the sonic material, but also to improve the form. So you could say that the chaos itself doesn't necessarily produce right away an interesting result. So my feeling was that I can start with this as an idea, but then it has to be shaped. It has to be listened to. Each person has to learn to deal with this kind of situation, this kind of material, and little bit by little bit, you've got a better and better, more interesting result. Better only in the sense of richer. You could say more satisfying as composition. So after many, many weeks of working together, I think that what we produced last night was considerably better than where we started. I don't know how good it really was. I have no way to judge it. But I can only say that compared to where we started, we got better and better results in terms of we learned to listen to each other more and more. We learned how to create little forms within the forms together, things like that. So, what else did I want to say here? So, what I wanted to say here is that basically we did have this idea that there are basically presenters of sounds, imitators of sounds, or transformers of sounds. So an imitator of sound can choose to imitate the sound of another by producing the same pitch, intensity, rhythm, for example, but not the same duration or timbre. The imitator can choose which dimensions of the sound to imitate. The transformer of that sound can choose to raise or lower the pitch, raise or lower the dynamics, increase or decrease durations, change the rhythm by adding to it or subtracting from it, etc. So, in the end, what we were trying to do is make it so that over a period of time, that there would be, out of this, you could say, seeming chaos, that an emergent form would appear. That from the possibilities of the original raw score, that the performers would gradually learn something about the musical process of composition itself. So the point is, instead of doing an analysis of piece for children, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you show them what composition is about by having them participate in the composing process. Because in such a piece, they're part of it. They're necessarily part of it because the score isn't completely written out. So they also have to generate some materials based on the choices that they make. And so you have a process here which is a score which is open, but not without constraints. Some constraints are written, others are chosen by performers as to how to react to the others in a way that is disciplined, that is based on careful listening as opposed to, let's say, totally free improvisation. So I don't consider what we did to be improvisation, because there was this which says you can't just do anything, which means that in the middle of the piece, somebody can't just all of a sudden decide to throw in English phonemes or German phonemes or Russian, other Russian phonemes other than the ones that are in the word petichki. So there are constraints, and the constraints are important. So I try to then contrast this to what happens in so-called free jazz. And I say that much practice goes on with them as well, to ensure that the result will be very disciplined. So one of my favorite free jazz musicians, Cecil Taylor, the great pianist, say he was rehearsing with his piano 8 hours a day. So, people are always surprised. Oh, he makes improvised music. What is he doing for 8 hours a day? Well, in fact, what he's doing for 8 hours a day is preparing materials that he might use depending on what he hears the others doing. So, people who know each other well and can anticipate what sort of sounds will be presented to them, then you could say have not so much a need to write it all down. Even a minimal score can be helpful to get them started. So clearly in this kind of music, the idea of what's necessary to write down, what's not necessary to write down, how much to write, how much to not write, is a question. And it's one of the questions that I would like to discuss with the group, which is the question of precision in the score. Because this score is, you could say, one extreme of what I've done, and then I have others where absolutely every detail, 5-6 parameters at a time, are written out. So I've tried the whole gamut of notation, from hyper-detailed notation to pretty open notation. And let's just say that the experience with this Petichki Sveta piece convinces me that it is more with this kind of score that you have chance to convey to children what is this music, what is this contemporary music, and how can they be part of it. Because I think that frequently when people go into schools to talk about contemporary music, what they do is they either play recordings or maybe they play for the children, but the children can't really participate that much. Or I remember in the first years when I was working with Xenakis, we had this machine called UPIC where you draw scores graphically. Okay, so the children could do this, they could draw the scores graphically, but it never really was an introduction to what you would call music making, or how composing then leads to making a piece. So what I'm kind of interested in are scores that help children to be part of that process of composing as performers, how they can participate in the process of creation itself, because I think that basically people have become, with regard to classical music, very passive. In other words, whereas at one point everybody played an instrument and sometimes people played in small groups, my father, who was not a musician at all, learned to play the trumpet, and he played trumpet with his brothers who played violin and piano and other instruments. And these were not people who were destined to be musicians or composers or anything else. It was just part of the practice that everybody learned some kind of an instrument and that people played together. So I would like to see, in terms of the pedagogy of contemporary music, that there would be some work done to give scores that could be played by the students so that they could be part of this process and have some idea. I think we might end up with more listeners if we had people participate in the process of playing the music. So, questions?
Thank you first. I have actually a question for children. What do you think about птички? Как вы думаете?
It was good to do the piece.
Interesting for you?
Yes, because there is many different possibilities for doing the piece. That you could do. You could imagine that you are a bird, but you can imagine that you are a mechanical bird.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you could do other things, but there is many different birds, so you could be a bird who does some very different from another bird.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Yeah. Talk something for camera. Or not. Yeah, it's not necessary. Kas kellelgi on küsimusi? When all is clear, then
I would like to say that it was very, very interesting to listen yesterday your last piece in Estonia for Estonians. I'm sure that it's totally different people, for example, in France or Russia or England or somewhere else listen it, but the Estonians, because the cultural context, and we know the so-called original or songs or what you were influenced or on which material you did it, and this context makes it very interesting. How do you feel it, and I wanted to ask if you listened also this songs, or did you use only the texts?
No, I listened to some of the historical recordings that were available, and listening to for example, the grandmothers singing these songs, because it seems typical that many older women are singing these songs in a group. This again with the language and the music, the connection between the two. I had the idea also in listening to this that there is a kind of chaos in this music, because they're not quite together. It's a kind of heterophonic kind of music. Also there are micro intervals in the music, and that the rhythms, at least in the recordings that I heard, are not strict. That there is something that's very, very fluid in the way that each person who's singing. They're singing together, but at the same time, they're not absolutely on anything too fixed. And this I liked very, very much. So what I tried to do in the piece was to work with this idea of heterophony and its connection to chaos, because I was trying to also then see, is there anything in this Estonian folk music that could be possibly connected with pure tuning, and also sometimes I was making in electronic parts, you could say, drones that were made of the scale notes of the melodies, to see what this gives when you sing against that. So I know that from the recordings that they're singing without accompaniment, it's a cappella. But I was also interested to see what happens when you have something that's more or less fixed, like a drone or something like that, and then there is this kind of unpredictability in the songs. And I liked this idea in these songs very much, because you would never know in listening to the recordings, and this is why when I read the translations, I was astonished. These songs are violent. These songs are strong. These songs are talking about very primordial, ancient things, like the bird that creates the world, and that creates the moon and the sun, and then this battle with the oak tree. The human beings, they want to chop down the oak, but the oak wants to survive.
May I give you an idea that it way interesting if you made a CD or some couple of pieces on the theme of different folk songs from different nations, and it were very, very interesting. How did you use used this Estonian folk song, but for example Georgian or I don't know which.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't make any study of different folk songs of different countries. I mean, the Estonian ones seemed to me very interesting. I also listened recently to ones from Albania, which were also quite interesting.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, there are in these folk songs there is something that is, what was really interesting for me is in France, the French chanson is a kind of cabaret music, and it's very light. And you would never find in this French music taking on the topics that these Estonian songs take on. These Estonian songs are very, very deep songs, and they talk about things that are terrible. I mean, this one song about about the kid who kills himself by putting his axe into his leg. It's awful, this song. But the point is that there's no fear to do this in this Estonian song. This is what I really admire, that they're not afraid to talk about the most important things, creation, death, end of things. It's all there, and this gives me it gave me a very big respect for this culture, this Estonian culture, and I thought, wow, these are people who suffered a lot, and you feel the suffering in the songs. You know, even if the songs sometimes are interpreted a bit on the flat side, I thought to myself, I can take what's implicit in them and work with that. In other words, to bring out the feelings that are there, but which are generally performed not so expressively. But it's there. It's there. It's there in every word and in every expression. So I was so glad to discover this music and this poetry, because I didn't know. And I thank Anders for inviting me to be part of this, because I learned a lot from this experience. And you know, nobody talks about such things outside of the culture, right? I mean, you'll never find anyone in France talking about Estonian folk songs, right? And each culture, you could say, operates in a bit of a vacuum. It's all by itself, and it has its own thing. But the other ones, what about the other ones? Every country, every culture has its uniqueness, you know? So I was glad to discover the uniqueness of the Estonian song and Estonian poetry, because it's very strong. And then Andrus told me some more about the history of Estonia. When you understand the history, these songs are absolutely logical. You know, all of these years to be tortured by these other people, these invaders who come in and destroy everything. It's awful. And, you know, we were working and the lines come in about Russian army is roaming around. Nothing's changed, right? Absolutely nothing's changed. I don't know how old that song is, but many, many hundreds of years. And still, it's the same thing, over and over again, you know?
Song is old, but of course, because it is suuline, oral tradition, so it changes words and this this concrete topics are the same, but concrete words are changed. Yeah. So it is in this level, in level of words, it often was improvised. Yeah, in the place.
Yes.
That's this archetypic. It goes back some thousands and thousands years. So compared to French culture is very young. Comparing with Finno-Ugric, this.
Nowadays, I understand that. I mean, like folklorists and scientists, they can make a difference. That what is this, like the roots of, let's say, like the original text or song, because they must have some kind of certain models in some points. But when this song doesn't have this thing, then it's quite a new song, probably maybe 100, 150. But when they have roots, some places, formulas, and then it's like from origin.
Okay, but thank you. Absolutely great.
Thank you.
Thank you.